Hey, okay, so this is a little part two to my vlog for today. It's Friday, the 5th of July, the afternoon, Friday the 5th of July. Beautiful, beautiful sunny day. This is my garden, and I've been very much enjoying being in the sunshine this afternoon and reading a bit more of the book, which I have over here, which I keep on forgetting is going to be backwards now for you guys, but yeah, it's basically There is a Cure for Diabetes, the 21-day holistic recovery program by Dr. Gabriel Cousens. So yeah, reading more of this afternoon, and I'm just finding it really fascinating. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through, and yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about calorie restriction because I've just gotten to the part in the book where he talks about it, and I'm just finding it really fascinating that he talks about the importance of um, calorie restriction in terms of it helping to switch off the inflammatory processes that somebody with diabetes and other autoimmune and a whole host of other illnesses and diseases would probably be experiencing. Um, and yeah, and the importance of basically turning off and numbing down those inflammatory responses to sustain the reversal of diabetes. So yeah, I find that really, really interesting because it's completely in line with my own findings. Just to give you a little bit of background, I was actually diagnosed about 3 months ago now. It was mid-February. Um, as being diabetic, but they kind of assumed that it was type 2 diabetes just because that's what I think 80% of, or maybe even 90% of the population have. So they just kind of went with that. But then basically further tests along the line, which was only about, certainly no more than a month ago, maybe a bit less, I discovered that I was actually type 1 diabetic, and that was because they tested for a GAD antibody, which is in your pancreas, and it's generally meant to be below 5, and mine was 1,600. It was just insane, basically. So not ever so cool, but told us, it was, at least I kind of knew what I was dealing with, and it kind of made sense because I wasn't finding it. I was surprised that my blood sugars, after 3 months of working really, really hard, was still pretty erratic. So what it did mean is that I had a kind of 3 month head start to kind of get my head around it all and to use that time to experiment. So initially I went for higher GI carbs, so I immediately cut out sugar, refined sugar, and pretty much mostly fruit sugars. I did have some berries, but yeah, mostly fruit sugars as well, and went for a high glycemic index or glycemic load. Low glycemic. Basically, the type of carbohydrates that's slow releasing. So I was having that for a while, and I was having things like oats for breakfast, and maybe a little bit of rye bread or rye crackers, um, and things like quinoa and other slow releasing carbs. But my blood sugars were still pretty, they did come down a bit, but they still weren't in the healthy range by any stretch of the imagination, and quite often again went into double figures, which I spoke about the range of that in my last video. So I kind of was like, okay, well, that's better than it was, but it's still not where it should be. So then I went to low carb, and initially I went to less than 100 grams of carbs a day, I think. And again, there was some improvement, but not quite enough. And so then I went to below 50 grams of carbs a day, and and for the first time in my life, I thought, okay, I'm going to also look at calories because I've never really looked at calories in my life. I've never been one to really follow diets or, I mean, other than a lifestyle diet, I've not really been one. I did once do Weight Watchers in my 20s. That was a disaster. But other than that, I'm not really one to go on diet. So I didn't really have a clue about calories. So I thought, okay, I'm going to look at calories as well. And so for about 2 weeks, I went on less than 50 grams of carbs a day and around 1,200 calories a day. And my blood sugars were great. They were in a really good range, and I was really happy with where my blood sugars were at. But I was really hungry a lot of the time, and also I didn't have the energy to exercise. And now that I've gotten into exercise, I don't really want to, live a lifestyle that means that I can't exercise so much. So, essentially, I kind of thought I can't keep up this 1,200 calories. Now, bearing in mind that I wasn't following raw food or vegan, so I think that's also interesting, which I'll go into in a moment. So I upped my calories to probably, I mean, they were still within range for somebody of my age and weight and height, etc. But I was probably having between, I'll say, 1,800 to 2,000, maximum 2,200 calories a day. Probably more around the 2,000 calorie mark because I'm following it all on a little app called MyFitnessPal. So when I did that, my blood sugars went into not desirable numbers again, which is when it was around that time that I also found out that I was type 1 diabetic, not type 2,